And we begin this hour with breaking news, just learning that the Senate Republicans have elected John Thune to be the next Senate Majority Leader. Thune will now replace Mitch McConnell, despite President-elect Donald Trump's endorsement of Florida Senator Rick Scott. And this news comes after two massive announcements by Trump about his Department of Defense and the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. We're going to bring you the very latest on all of it right now. I'm Ben Swan. This is Truth in Media.
Any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke shit has got to go. Either you're in for war fighting, and that's it.
Well, that is President-elect Donald Trump's pick to be the next Secretary of Defense. Fox News host Pete Hegseth. Hegseth is no stranger to the screen, has a huge online following, and has been a strong advocate for veterans. But critics in the Pentagon and defense world are buzzing. They are questioning his experience, even wondering if he is prepared to take on the massive role of leading the U.S. military. Hegseth is a Princeton graduate. He was commissioned as an infantry officer in the Army National Guard, serving overseas in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as at Guantanamo Bay. Hegseth has been openly spoken about Zionism as being akin to Americanism. He's also urged President Trump to pardon U.S. service members who have been accused of war crimes. He's advocated for those servicemen's cases on his Fox News show and online. But it is his stance against wokeism inside the U.S. military that may have many people inside the Pentagon worried.
There's a reason people don't want to serve, because they don't trust that their senior leaders are going to have their best interest in mind in combat. Trust is broken, and you have to reestablish that trust by putting in no-nonsense warfighters in those positions who aren't going to cater to the socially correct garbage.
All right, so you have Pete Hegseth going into the Department of Defense. Meanwhile, one announcement that's really been kind of flying under the radar is President-elect Donald Trump calling on John Ratcliffe to be the head of the CIA. I got to tell you, of all the announcements that have come out in the last 24 hours, and there have been some big ones, to me, this is the most important one that, again, has been flying under the radar. It's a much bigger deal than people are giving it credit for. John Ratcliffe, he is no friend of the Russia collusion narrative. In fact, he called the entire investigation into Russian interference in 2016 as a hoax. Remember, it was the CIA itself that created so many of these false narratives surrounding Russia collusion. In fact, here's a clip of Ratcliffe when he questioned former special agent from the FBI, Peter Strzok, on Capitol Hill.
You were in charge of an investigation investigating, gathering evidence against Donald Trump, a subject that you hated, that you wanted to F him, to stop him, to impeach him. And do you see why that might call into question everything you've touched on all of those investigations?
All right, so folks in the deep state, they're raising alarms, fearing that this pick is another political move, they say, to root out Trump's political enemies within the intelligence community. Well, guess what? If it is, good. They say they're worried about a political purge on anyone who dared to challenge Trump's first presidency. Well, we can only hope that that is the case. But not just that. This move is to get control of deep state agencies like the CIA and the NSA and the FBI aggressively. These are rogue agencies that have been allowed to act without accountability and with impunity for decades. They have undermined presidents all the way back to John F. Kennedy. They may have killed Kennedy. The CIA has worked to overthrow governments all over the world and appears to have used those tactics, right here over the past decade to sow domestic unrest. And that is the real reason that these deep state actors are so afraid. They are terrified of accountability. Well, meanwhile, Trump's bringing the guy that he has called the cutter-in-chief, Elon Musk, for the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. He'll also be joined by Vivek Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy famously said that up to 80% of federal bureaucrats can and should be fired. Listen.
Then you look at the 4 million people, civil servants or whatever, and say that, okay, if we have 80% fewer regulations, then we need 80% fewer people to enforce them. That simply makes sense.
So you've got Elon and you've got Vivek cutting government bureaucracy in size. According to this announcement, though, this is a temporary gig, and that the Department of Government Efficiency should be complete with its work by July 4th, 2026. All right, now to the post-election conversation. You know, with so much going on and so much to talk about after the election, some of us have kind of forgotten about Hurricane Helene and all the damage that was caused in places like North Carolina and Tennessee. But remember this, I want to show you some video here. This was a helicopter that reportedly was disrupting supplies in certain areas. And these were apparently FEMA helicopters doing this. We showed you this video about a month ago. Social media flagged it as disinformation, misinformation, blocked people from seeing it, said you couldn't see it, that FEMA would never do something terrible like this, right? Well, it turns out not only was this video real, not only did this happen in multiple different instances, but the effort behind it to punish voters who might support Trump was also very real. In group chats, FEMA employees were directed to implement best practices, which included the directive to, quote, avoid homes advertising Trump. One employee, Marini Washington, was fired, but she claims that she was scapegoated and that this was a wider policy within FEMA to avoid Trump-supporting households. Listen.
So this is not isolated. This is a colossal event of avoidance, not just in the state of Florida, but you will find avoidance in the Carolinas. Senior leadership will lie to you and tell you that they do not know. But if you ask the DSA crew leads and specialists what they are experiencing in the field, they will tell you. Demand for FEMA to give you those incident reports.
Yeah, joining us now with more on this is Amy Lepore, Chief Operating Officer at Dissident Media. Amy, great to have you here. Let's talk about this because, as we mentioned, we showed this video, about a month ago with the helicopters, the slow response from FEMA. People were saying for a long time, why is FEMA not here? Why is FEMA stopping supplies from getting into these hurricane-ravaged areas? And we were all told, oh, you're crazy. Nothing's happening here. And now it turns out not only was it all true, but it was directly pointed at people who had the wrong political views.
Yeah, they have given us evidence, right? A thing we have long thought, which is that FEMA is woke, is now kind of come to pass. And I think that there's a lot to pick apart here, but the director, Deanna Criswell, in her leadership of FEMA, her priority has been equity the entire time. Equity is the first goal in their strategic plan. It is not response, right? They're prioritizing equity, and she's making sure that in all things they do, there is this level of questioning. Trump supporters are to be avoided, and this goes back to training and manuals that their personnel are indoctrinated with.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Equity, right? That word is so important because we hear it all the time. And what we're told over and over is that equity is about making sure that the people who most need the help get it, but it's really not. Equity is less about who gets help, and it's more about who doesn't get help, who should not be prioritized, who does not deserve to have the response moved to them first, or even simultaneously. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we see with any woke organization, especially an emergency management organization whose sole job should be attend to the emergency, not decide who's worthy of your attention.
Yep. Under Criswell's leadership, there are a number of examples of this, and I'll give you one of the most inflammatory. While Maui burned and 1,000 people were still missing, FEMA personnel sat in a classroom with equity training, learning that white supremacy is the biggest threat that faces America right now. This is the tenor and the tone of training that Criswell is putting her personnel through. And so when we come across issues like what has gone on in Florida and the problematic response in Appalachia, we should not be scratching our heads and wondering why.
Yeah, you make such a good point. And when you're being told that white supremacy is the biggest threat that facing America to people whose biggest threat is fire at the time, that's burning their houses down, right? It's ludicrous. What do you think about this DOGE department, right? Department of Government Efficiency. Are they going to take a look, do you think, at departments like FEMA? Will they downsize it? Do you think they should just do away with it completely? Because it feels like since the beginning, FEMA is a fairly new organization, right? 20-some years old. At this point, wouldn't we just be better off saying, let's get rid of it because they're completely ineffective, it seems like, and again, return that power to the states and National Guards?
Yeah, years ago, state governments and charities and churches were responsible for disaster response. I'm not a person who believes that FEMA adds very much. Now, what they're supposed to do, coordination, they obviously aren't doing correctly either. And we have numerous examples, right? Starting with Katrina, a number of other hurricanes, and then also looking at Milton and Helene. I think that the concept of government efficiency, taking a look at that is important. There aren't two better people to do it, but they're limited in scope. So we can only hope that the president takes their recommendations. Yeah,
and again, when you're going to put certain agencies on the chopping block, I know Department of Education looks like one that's going to be. To me, it makes a lot of sense to do away with FEMA, as you said. The more power you concentrate in federal hands, it seems like the less effective it becomes. It's not about, anything other than common sense. Look at the results of the last 20 years. They've been pretty pitiful.
Pretty terrible. And we understand that there are ways that they can look at efficiency in FEMA and make quick cuts. In 2002, the GAO put out a report that said that FEMA managers were complaining to upper level personnel that their folks out in the field were unable to properly do their jobs. They were not qualified for disaster response. And this came out in a report that really should have had everyone taking a look at FEMA then. So if we get a chance to take a look at it now, I think you can start with people that are not qualified to be in those roles.
Amy, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben.
Well, if the election was bad for anyone, it was really, really, really bad for legacy media for a couple of reasons, right? Not only were they wrong in every prediction that they made, fantastically wrong in every prediction that they made. Not only that, but they clearly put themselves in a position where they don't understand audiences at all anymore. And as a result, they're now hemorrhaging viewers once again. For instance, CNN's Chris Wallace just announced that he is leaving the network. He's leaving CNN, claiming, I love this, streaming is where it's at. Really? Wait, hold on. Chris Wallace, 77 years old, says streaming for guys like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn, yeah, he understands that that's where the listeners are. That's where the influence is. So he's going to move to independent podcasting platforms and take the Chris Wallace brand there. Should be fantastic, Chris. He's going to do great. Everyone wants to know what he thinks about the world. Look, here's part of the problem, right? The problem isn't just the medium, because what mainstream legacy companies think now is they're all hearing podcasting. That's how Trump won. And so they've decided that they're going to shift towards this new medium. It's not the medium that won, it's the message, a message they're afraid to put out there. Since the election, CNN's primetime viewership has dropped 30%. Here's a question. What's 30% of zero? MSNBC took a massive 54% hit compared to last year. Fox News, well, they saw a 60% spike in ratings. Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. CNN and MSNBC have been telling viewers nonstop for the past year Trump would not win, he had no following, that he had destroyed his political career because of J6, that Harris was going to save the country from Hitler. They were so spectacularly wrong that even the most faithful viewers just can't take it anymore. So here's the question. What will change? Anything? Well, a few anchors may jump ship. That will probably happen. A few others will get cut. But these networks, the question is, will they actually evolve? It's not likely, because these networks are trapped in their elite bubbles. They refuse to acknowledge a new generation of viewers who are just not buying what they're selling. And it's even worse than that. Let me tell you something. CNN could be fixed. MSNBC could be fixed. But in order to do that, you have to get all the government agency spooks who were working there out the door. You have to cut off Big Pharma. You have to stop worrying about which parties you'll be invited to. You just have to tell the truth. And unfortunately for them, that may be too big of a lift. And that is our show. You can catch all of our latest coverage. Check us out on X at @truth_in_media and watch all of our full episodes. You can do it right now at truthinmedia.com.